Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Asaba, there stood a popular shawarma spot called Shawarma Central. It was located in the heart of the city, along a busy road, filled with traffic, noise, and people. But unlike the typical rush of the city, there was something different about the crowd at Shawarma Central. People did not just walk by, they lined up for hours, patiently waiting to have a taste of the famous shawarma. Over time, the spot became more than just a food joint. So many couples testified to finding love on the queue of Shawarma Central, and this rumor brought more people to the spot, especially those who were desperate and searching for love. The spot grew busier with each passing day, selling over 10,000 shawarmas on a daily. Yet, no one had ever seen who prepared the food. Behind the counter were sales girls, dressed in red uniforms, who never smiled or conversed with customers. All they did was hand over the shawarma to the customer, who paid and left immediately. No one asked questions. No one really cared about the girls. All they wanted was the shawarma, and once they got it, nothing else mattered. One day, a young woman whose name was Paula flew into Asaba for the very first time. She had come into town for her friend's wedding and was on her way to her hotel when the airport taxi she was currently in drove past a thick crowd of people lined up outside a shawarma spot. Curious, Paula turned to look. The driver caught her gaze and grinned. "You've never seen a shawarma spot like this before, Abby?" he asked, and Paula smiled politely and responded, "Not really. What's going on here?" She asked the driver, who revealed to her that the place was called Shawarma Central, the only spot that sold the best shawarma in the entire world. He said with conviction as Paula laughed and began to speak. "The best shawarma in the world? Come on. Have you really tried all the shawarmas in the entire world to come to this conclusion?" She asked the driver, who chuckled and shook his head. "I don't need to try all of them. Once you eat this one, you understand what I'm saying. In fact, before you leave town, make sure you try it. If you're not convinced, I'll refund your money," he said to Paula, who began to laugh. "That's some confidence, I must say," she said to the driver, who pulled up in her hotel and thanked her for using his service. As she stepped out of the taxi, Paula saved the driver's number on her phone. "Just in case I decide to visit the shawarma spot, I'll call you and make sure you keep my money in case it doesn't turn out to be the best shawarma in the entire world," she said to the driver, who laughed and drove off from the hotel. Paula arrived her room a few minutes later and decided to call her sister Diane, whose room was in the same hotel. She called and called, but Diane was not picking up her calls, so Paula decided to take a quick shower. She had a long day and needed a cold shower to calm her nerves. 15 minutes later, she got out of the bathroom and saw a text message on her phone. It was from Diane, who informed her that she was out with friends. "I'll call you much later," the message read as Paula rolled her eyes and dropped the phone on the bed, deciding to go dress up. Her sister Diane was a party animal who loved to party and have a good time. Unlike Paula, who was an introvert with little to no friends, Diane had friends wherever she went. In fact, their friend who was getting married in a few days was initially Diane's friend, who ended up becoming Paula's friend as well. Paula stood there dressed as she stared out of the hotel window. Her eyes caught sight of Shawarma Central, which was filled with people waiting to be served. Paula could not tame her curiosity. She loved shawarma so much and could not wait to try out the famous shawarma that everyone was now talking about. She called the driver on the phone, who arrived a few minutes later to pick her up. They arrived at the shawarma spot, and Paula walked out of the car to join the queue. She waited for a few minutes and finally got to the front of the line to place her order. Paula could feel a chill run down her spine when her eyes met that of the sales girl, who handed her shawarma to her. Paula asked what her name was, but the girl ignored her completely as she turned to serve the next customer on the line. Paula returned to the taxi. She could not take her mind off the strange encounter that she just had. However, the scent of the shawarma in her hands quickly stole her attention. She unwrapped it slowly, like she was unboxing a hidden treasure. The aroma was unlike anything that she had ever smelled. Rich, smoky, spicy, with a mysterious sweetness that she could not place. Paula took the first bite, and her eyes widened in complete shock. Her body melted into the seat as she let out a soft gasp and began to chew. The shawarma was perfect, unlike anything that she had ever had. The bread was soft and slightly crisp at the edges. The meat was tender and juicy, marinated so deeply that it felt like it had been soaked for days. The sauce was bold, garlicky, spicy, yet smooth like butter. It didn't taste like chicken or beef. It tasted like complete magic. By the time she realized what she had done, the wrap was gone. Paula had finished it in minutes, licking her fingers as her mind spun like a carousel. Paula had never felt this way before. She now knew why thousands of people stood on the queue for hours just to have a taste of the famous shawarma. She stared down at the second wrap, which was supposed to be for her sister Diane. In that moment, her phone buzzed, but Paula ignored it completely, as all she could ever think about was having more of the shawarma. She looked down and blinked as she fought the mental war on if to eat her sister's shawarma or not. Paula could not resist the urge. She unwrapped the shawarma and began to eat, each bite more satisfying than the last. For the first time in years, Paula felt a peace that she could not describe. It was like floating in the clouds, the kind that numbed your emotions and made you forget that the world existed. The driver turned slightly as he watched her through the mirror. "You don't finish the two?" he asked with a grin on his face as Paula managed a smile and began to speak. "This shawarma is the best shawarma that I've ever eaten," she said to the man who laughed and teased her for not believing him earlier. They arrived at the hotel and Paula was still basking in the euphoria of the moment. She entered her hotel room and dropped her phone on the bed, collapsing into the bed without even bothering to change out of her clothes. She didn't even draw the curtains close as she fell into the bed and shut her eyes. Paula had planned to catch a quick nap, but what she did not know was that sleeping after eating shawarma central was the wrongest thing that she could have ever done. She fell into a very deep sleep and woke up a few hours later to find herself tied up in an extremely dark room. Her mouth was gagged and her hands were tied up behind her back. Paula could feel her heart race in her chest. She tried to scream, but the sound barely escaped her mouth. The room was dead silent. No voices, no footsteps, not even a single sound. Suddenly, a door creaked open and Paula caught sight of a figure walking towards her in the distance. Her eyes opened in wide terror as she wondered what was happening. Paula tried so hard to break free as the figure approached her and poured a powdery substance on her face. Paula fell into another deep sleep. Meanwhile, her sister Diane returned to the hotel hours later, but Paula was nowhere to be found. She tried calling her number repeatedly, but the line rang and rang with no response. Diane knocked on her sister's room door, but Paula did not respond. She approached the male receptionist, who informed her that Paula walked into her room a few hours ago. "She might be asleep in the room, or maybe she went out when I was on my break," the receptionist said as they both went to check the room. The receptionist opened the door, but Paula was nowhere to be found. Her bag was on the table, and Diane wondered where she could have gone by that time of the night. So she returned to her room, hoping that Paula would return, but Paula never returned. Morning came, and Diane could no longer hide her fear. She called everyone she could think of, including her friend, whose wedding they had come for, but no one had seen or heard from Paula. Diane did not know what to do. Paula's number was now switched off, and Diane wished that she picked up her call earlier the previous day. She decided to go through her messages and saw a message from Paula stating that she was going to buy shawarma from the famous shawarma spot. Diane booked a taxi and decided to head to the spot. She got into the taxi, and the driver turned out to be the same driver who carried Paula to the spot the previous day. Diane had no idea. She sat at the back of the taxi, worried and terrified, as the taxi drove her to the shawarma spot. They arrived at the spot a few minutes later, and Diane walked around in the crowd, hoping to find her sister. She pulled out a picture on her phone and began to show people, asking if they had seen her, but no one seemed to have seen Paula around. Diane decided to ask the sales girls, who all ignored her question and continued their jobs as if nothing had happened. She wrote her number and dropped in the corner, pleading that if they ever see her sister, they should not hesitate to give her a call. Diane returned to the taxi broken. She burst out in tears as she began to cry, praying that nothing bad happens to her sister. The taxi driver could not help but notice her distress. He asked to know why she was crying, and Diane revealed to him that her sister was missing. She then grabbed her phone and showed him a picture of Paula, who the man recognized in an instant. "I know her," he said to Diane, who looked at him stunned as she began to ask if he knew where she was. The taxi driver informed her that he dropped her in the hotel the previous evening after she returned from buying some shawarma from Shawarma Central. She walked into the hotel after having 2 wraps of shawarma, he said to Diane, who told him to drive her back to the hotel. Diane could not understand how her sister could go missing just like that. She arrived at the hotel again as she stormed the front desk to meet the receptionist who she met earlier. "You said my sister might have gone out, but the driver who brought her here said that he watched her enter this hotel last night. So where is she?" The receptionist, a slim man in his late 20s, adjusted his tie and replied, "Like I told you, I might have been on my break when she left," he said to Diane, who continued to scream out angrily. "But her bag is still in the room, her shoes, everything. Does that make sense to you?" Diane snapped as the receptionist looked up at her with confused eyes. Diane then decided to take the matter to the police. Her father was an army general, and Diane could not help but alert her father about her sister's disappearance. Within minutes, police officers stormed the hotel and requested to see the CCTV footage of the previous night. They were all led to the small security room, where all the CCTV footages were being reviewed. Diane stood with the officers as the operator pulled up the footage from the night before. Everyone in the room fell silent as they watched as Paula exited the taxi and walked into the lobby, holding her handbag as she made her way to her room. A few minutes later, the CCTV showed a man in black uniform walking into her room moments before the footage scrambled and cut off. The police asked to see the man in the footage, but no one knew where he was. His name was Daniel, and the hotel manager revealed that he was a junior housekeeping staff in the hotel. What was more shocking was the fact that Daniel was not supposed to be on duty that night. The officers requested to see Daniel, who was found hours later, trying to run away with his bags. He was dragged to the station by 2 officers who arrested him as he was trying to elope. "No, please, I didn't hurt anyone," he cried out as he was pushed into the back of the police van. At the police station, Daniel sat trembling in the interrogation room. His hands cuffed to the cold metal table. His eyes were red with fear as he could barely sit still. When the lead investigator entered with a cold stare as well as a thick file under his arm, Daniel flinched. "We know you entered room 211 the night Paula went missing," the officer said calmly. "We also know you weren't meant to be on duty that night." Daniel said nothing for a long time, but after nearly 2 hours of questioning, he finally broke. He swallowed hard and said in a voice barely louder than a whisper, "I got a call." The officer leaned forward. "A call? From who?" Daniel looked down at the table. "I don't know. It was a private number." The voice was a woman's voice. "She told me that she was calling from the hotel. Said there was a guest who made a huge mess in one of the rooms, and the regular staff had refused to handle it because it was disturbing." He paused, clearly shaking. "She said if I cleaned it up quietly, she transferred 500,000 naira into my account. I was desperate. I hadn't been paid in months. My mother was in the hospital." "So you came?" the officer finished grimly. Daniel nodded slowly. "I did. Around midnight. They left the key for me at the back reception." The story seemed so convenient, but the police found it hard to believe. They checked his account, and truly, 500,000 had been transferred to his account as he claimed. However, no one knew exactly if he was telling the truth. For all they might have known, Daniel might have been paid to kidnap Paula, so the police decided to detain him till the truth is revealed. Their father, General Tanko, arrived a few hours later with 2 military officers in tow. His presence alone sent ripples through the entire police station. Even the officers who had been questioning Daniel stood straighter the moment he entered the room. "Where is my daughter?" he barked angrily as the lead investigator cleared his throat and assured him that they were doing everything possible to find her. "We have detained a man named Daniel who claimed to have been paid a huge sum of money to clean your daughter's room that night. However, we are yet to ascertain if he is the mastermind or a pawn," they said to the general, who informed them that if his daughter was not found in 24 hours, he would take over the case. Meanwhile, Diane was sitting in the waiting area crying. Her father joined her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll find her, Diane, I promise," he said to Diane, when suddenly one of the officers rushed in holding a printout. "Sir, we were able to trace the origin of the phone call that Daniel received on that night. The call came from inside Shawarma Central." A thick silence followed as General Tanko's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "The famous shawarma joint?" he asked as the officers nodded his head in agreement. "Yes, sir, and it even gets stranger. This same number was connected to 3 other suspicious disappearances of girls who went missing from nearby hotels in the last 2 months." The officer pulled out a file with 3 photos, all young women new to the city who vanished after visiting Shawarma Central. Diane looked at the photos and gasped. It was no longer a coincidence. General Tanko stood up as the police gathered their men and headed for the famous shawarma spot. They parked their trucks in a distance as the officers quietly made their way through the back of the shop, their eyes widening in disbelief as they caught sight of a man slicing through the flesh of a human leg. Shawarma Central did not sell normal shawarma. They sold shawarmas made of human meat that they derived from women who were new to the city. The owner of the restaurant was the taxi man who always stationed his car at the airport, fishing for young women who were arriving the city for the very first time. He only went after these kinds of women, knowing that by the time anyone comes looking for them, he would have served their flesh to unsuspecting people who bought his delicious shawarma. The more he killed these women, the more their spirits drew people to his restaurant. The police raided the entire place and found Paula tied up in one of the rooms at the back. She was still alive, so they rushed her to the hospital for treatment. Diane could not believe that she rode in the taxi of the man who almost murdered her own sister. As the police continued their sweep of Shawarma Central, dozens of disturbing discoveries emerged. They found the sales girls, who all turned out to be under a spell. The police also found shelves of personal belongings of the girls who the evil man had murdered. Inside a drawer in the back office, a torn notebook was also found. The contents revealed coded messages, payment records, and a name: Mrs. Adebayo, manager of the Vine Hotels, the hotel where Paula and Diane had been staying. What they did not know was that the taxi driver paid the manager to allow him abduct Paula from the hotel. The manager tampered with CCTV video and also set up the cleaner in case things blew out of proportion. The police arrested the manager of the hotel as well as the owner of Shawarma Central, who everyone believed was a taxi driver. Little did they know that he was the mastermind behind the evil that happened in the restaurant. Paula was rushed to the hospital, unconscious but breathing. The doctors placed her under intensive observation and assured General Tanko that she would recover. Diane sat beside her sister broken. She could not believe how close she had come to losing Paula to a plate of shawarma of all things. The next morning, headlines across the country exploded as all news outlets wrote about the shawarma of death. The people of Asaba were stunned to realize that they were eating shawarma made from human flesh. General Tanko used his influence to ensure that justice was served, not only for his daughter, but for the other victims and people who ate the evil shawarma without knowing. That was how the evil shawarma shop was exposed and shut down. The lesson to be learned from this story is that in a world full of hype, temptation, and blind trust, it is dangerous to follow the crowd without asking questions. Curiosity is natural, but unchecked desire can lead to destruction. Not everything that smells good is safe. Evil often hides behind beauty, sweetness, and popularity. We must be cautious, especially in unfamiliar places, and trust our instincts when something feels off. Your life is too precious to trade for a moment of pleasure, not even for the best shawarma in the world. I hope you enjoyed the story.